The winter of 1944 lay over the Belgian frontier like a cold shroud, tightening around every ruin, every trench, every trembling soldier who crouched behind a rifle. Snow blanketed the battered landscape, building over splintered farmhouses and collapsed barns until the whole region looked like a graveyard for forgotten villages. Among the exhausted men of the U.S. 28th Infantry Division, a wiry Kentucky farm boy named Bennett Calloway trudged through the shattered streets of the village called Hartholes. Thin, soft-spoken, and always carrying a little spiral notebook, he seemed far too gentle for war. Yet the rifle slung over his shoulder marked him as the platoon's best marksman, whether the platoon acknowledged it or not. Before the war, Ben had hunted squirrels in the Appalachian woods, where his father taught him something unusual: to shoot not at the animal itself, but at the open space the animal would move into. "Shoot the space," his father would whisper. "The critter don't know you're already waiting there for it." That strange philosophy had embedded itself deep into Ben's mind. When he reached Europe, he didn't look at the Germans. He looked at the tiny gaps between beams, the little slits left by collapsed roofs, the cracks in stone walls, the spaces between broken rafters. He kept a notebook full of sketches showing angles, sight lines, and mathematical scribbles even he sometimes struggled to explain. Most soldiers laughed. Some called him odd. Others called him slow. Lieutenant Harris once told him, "Calloway, this ain't church geometry. Just shoot the guy, not the air around him." Ben stopped explaining, but he never stopped studying the world in strange lines and invisible angles. When the platoon received orders to hold the broken village of Hartholes, Sergeant Frank Mallory, a gruff man with a thick mustache and a soft spot for his men, assigned positions without fuss. Corporal Eddie Romano, a loud-mouthed New Yorker with endless jokes, kept teasing Ben about his drawings. "Hey professor, you plannin' to build a house here or something? 'Cause you keep staring at wood like you're in love with it." Ben only answered with a small smile, but he continued climbing over the ruins, studying everything. A collapsed barn had created a triangular opening under its main beam. The church tower, blown open on its southern face, left two rafters leaning askew. A farmhouse wall had cracked vertically, leaving a slit barely wide enough to toss a coin through. Ben sketched these while Mallory barked, "Calloway! Stop sightseeing and get your hide back to the line." Ben obeyed, but not before drawing the angle created by two bent beams inside the barn. The first German probe came quietly at dawn. Fog drifted between the trees like ghosts. A few scattered rifle shots echoed. Then mortar shells thumped into the frozen ground, sending up blasts of powdered snow. Men ducked, cursed, or prayed. Ben didn't pray. He just watched the ruins. Through the triangular beam gap of the barn, he saw nothing. Through the parallel rafters of the church, only drifting fog. Through the cracked farmhouse slit, just darkness. Then he saw the faintest movement, not a man, not even part of a man, just the edge of a helmet barely visible through two beams aligned by coincidence. He whispered, "Sergeant, permission to shoot?" Mallory rolled his eyes. "You can't even see the guy." Ben didn't argue. He lowered his breath, squeezed gently, and the rifle cracked like a whip. A distant thud followed. Romano's eyes bulged. "Holy, Ben! You threaded a bullet through a building!" Mallory muttered something that might have been praise or disbelief. Ben simply murmured, "Through the space between the beams." That shot didn't just surprise the Americans, it caught the attention of a German officer observing from a ridge. Captain Dieter Kruger, a disciplined and coldly logical Wehrmacht officer, was known among his men as the engineer captain, due to his precision. He studied Hartholes through field glasses and saw the helmet shot. He didn't underestimate it. German snipers began firing decoys, helmets on sticks, reflections from mirrors, to mislead any American marksman. It became a quiet duel between Kruger's careful tactics and Ben's strange geometry. Over the next 3 days, the battle grew sharper. German snipers harassed the Americans relentlessly. 2 men were wounded by bullets that seemed to come from nowhere. Morale dipped. Ben noticed something subtle. The German marksman, who he suspected was Kruger himself, never shot from visible openings. Every shot came from behind full cover, firing only when absolutely necessary. Kruger was using total invisibility. Ben realized he was up against someone who thought like he did, someone who hid behind angles, not walls. At night, in a freezing cellar, Ben sketched every structural line in the village by candlelight. Romano peeked over his shoulder again and laughed. "Buddy, are you solving math or killing Nazis?" Ben answered softly. "I'm trying to find him." On the fourth morning, fog heavier than wet wool settled over everything. German artillery pounded the village. Men shouted through explosions, scrambling to defend gaps in the line. Ben climbed to the second floor of a destroyed house, scanning for the sniper. He saw no muzzle flash, no shadow, no glint. Then his father's voice echoed in his memory. "When you can't see the target, look for where the air looks wrong." Ben squinted at the drifting fog. Toward the old windmill on a distant hill, about 450 to 500 yards away, the fog flowed strangely, bending around a single vertical plank. A narrow gap existed between two boards, barely an inch wide. For half a second Ben saw the faintest shimmer, a scope glint. He froze. That was him. That was Kruger. The distance was nearly 480 yards. The beam gap was tiny. The bullet would have to pass through two pieces of broken wood, perfectly aligned. Mallory crawled beside him and said, "Calloway, if you're thinking what I think you're thinking, don't. That's impossible." Ben didn't argue. He steadied the rifle on the frozen windowsill. His heartbeat slowed. His breath calmed. Inhale. Hold. Exhale halfway. Squeeze. The rifle thundered, and silence followed. For a long moment, nothing. Then from the direction of the windmill came a faint crash, like a body hitting wood. Ben didn't smile. He didn't speak. He only watched. 20 minutes later, German soldiers emerged waving a white cloth, requesting a ceasefire to retrieve a wounded officer. Under the rules of war, Mallory allowed it. Two Germans carried the lifeless body of Captain Dieter Kruger. He had been shot precisely above the collarbone, an impossible shot by any logical standard. Romano whispered, "Ben, what the hell are you?" Mallory stared as if seeing him for the first time. "That was impossible," he muttered. Ben quietly said, "Beam gap angle." With Kruger gone, German sniper coordination collapsed. Their attacks became sloppy, disorganized. The Americans held the village until reinforcements arrived. Ben didn't boast or act proud. He didn't even speak of the shot again. He simply returned to cleaning rifles, digging snow-packed trenches, and sharing what little food the platoon had left. But the men now watched him with a mixture of awe and something close to fear. They realized he didn't see the battlefield like normal soldiers. He saw it like a map of invisible lines, spaces he knew bullets could travel through before the enemy ever imagined it. That night, sitting alone in the broken church, with the cold pressing in from every shattered stone, Ben opened his notebook and wrote, "December 12, 1944, 480 yards. Double beam gap. Daddy, I finally shot the space just right." His hands shook, not from cold, but from the awareness that he had stepped into something larger than himself. Romano sat beside him on the broken pew and said softly, "Ben, you ain't strange. You're a damn genius." Ben didn't reply at first. He stared at the distant woods where Kruger once watched them. "It's not genius," he finally whispered. "It's just knowing where someone might be looking back at you." The war would drag on, bloody and merciless, but from that day forward, every man in the platoon trusted Ben's bizarre instincts. Long after the war ended, they would tell the story of the day a quiet farm boy from Kentucky fired a bullet through two ruined beams at nearly half a mile, and brought down the enemy officer who had terrorized them. A shot that made no sense to ordinary men. A shot that passed through empty air. A shot that proved the world is not always about what you can see, but about the spaces between.